Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. Donald Trump is complicit in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. How you doing? I just thought I'd start that. I don't know what happened. I just slipped out. It's a drinking game. Don't worry about it. Nothing untoward here. It's all right. I'm not making any accusations or anything. I'm just saying people are talking about it. A lot of people are saying this is all I can tell you. And you should be aware of that. And when, as I said just a moment ago on Twitter, evidence finally emerges that the Trump administration did, in fact, greenlight the Khashoggi murder and or stand idly by while they knew it was taking place, collecting it as a favor. When that evidence finally emerges, the outrage machine will be in full gear, and they will demand an investigation, but they'll be demanding an investigation of the leak that revealed that they were complicit in the murder. And that will suddenly become the big deal. That's where the goalposts are going. Just thought I would point that out. Early speculation on the real estate beneath where that goalpost is going to land is open. Make sure you get in on the ground floor and make a killing, so to speak, on that bet. Daily Coast Radio is live now. That's what this is all about. Bill lets us know this all the way from Portland, Maine, which is an amazing feat considering I am all the way down here in Virginia. But that's the thing about time and keeping it standard. It enables things just like this. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Greg Dworkin, our own Dem from Connecticut, if you follow along on Twitter. And Joan McCarter, who is, of course, Joan McCarter on Twitter, much as she is in real life, will join me, who is Kagro X on Twitter, and David Waldman in real life, for 2 hours of the most delicious banana smoothie recipes you ever tried. Plus some murder in the consulate in Istanbul. A little bit of that will be thrown in just for flavor. And, that's the way life goes this morning. Oh, look, another retweet of something I saw very funny last night. I don't know why this is in my feed, but it seems to be largely true, and many people are finding some amusement in it. A picture of Kid Rock. Have you seen this thing? Now I guess I have to retweet the thing, even though it's been retweeted 43,684 times. I guess one more time can't hurt. Picture of Kid Rock doing what? I don't know. But Jacob Shaw, who, by the way, in case you want to follow Jacob Shaw, Jacob tweets under the handle of Jake Says You Suck. So I don't know if you still want to go ahead with it. But, it's not really true. He doesn't actually say that about you. You might as well give it a try, though. Who am I looking at? I don't even know who this is, but you should get to know him because he observes, why does Kid Rock, who I guess now sports both his long hair and goofy-looking glasses and a mustache, why does Kid Rock look like Dr. Phil dressed up as Kid Rock? It's a good question. He does look like Dr. Phil, and he doesn't look particularly like Dr. Phil dressed up as Kid Rock either. He just looks mostly like Dr. Phil. So I thought I'd share that one with you because it's super important. Right up there with the Sauds murdering a American-based journalist, a U.S.-based journalist. I guess is the most you can say about his residency. I think we're all supposed to be tap dancing around, is he actually a United States citizen or simply a permanent resident of the United States? I don't know. Who cares? He was murdered. Now I ask you, would you give a crap what the son of a bitch who murdered you with a bone saw said about your immigration status? I don't think so. Welcome again to another 2 hours of explaining everything in the world with movie quotes that are getting to be so old that some significant portion of the audience will have no idea what we're talking about. It's a sad fact. All right, well, let's see. We've got plenty of stories lined up. Greg has sent a couple of them over here, and it includes at least one YouTube video, which I guess it's too late for me to now play on air without ruining the podcast's availability on YouTube later on by infringing on the copyright of this YouTube video here, but I'm sure he will explain to us what's going on. But it looks particularly funny, and perhaps it will explain what's going on in the world. Much to catch up on. still more even darker news on the Khashoggi timeline because it's absolutely the worst thing that could ever have happened to an individual here, and so it will slowly and surely be revealed as being as terrible as everybody imagined it to be, and bit by bit these things are coming out. We're getting to the point now where reporting on it requires trigger warnings, but there's a new dispatch from the Middle East Eye, which we read from the other day, I think, on the Khashoggi story, and I saw retweeted earlier today along with the comment that this person who was retweeting it said, I was initially hesitant about retweeting this thing from the Middle East Eye. I don't know whether it was because they didn't know anything about them. I still don't know anything about them. Or whether the details were so sensational or that they were triggering in some way. But I'm glad to see that other people have the same hesitancy, but then still on second thought feel like it's worth passing on. So that's some validation. Perhaps we'll dive into that story later on, unless we take it all apart here, piece by piece with a bone saw, as it were, with Greg Dworkin. Good morning, Greg. Dark day, as the last several have been.
Yeah, when you have a president who's essentially declaring that he's a accessory after the fact to murder.
Yeah,
you put that I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and who would care? My voters would still support me to the test.
Yes. It didn't have to happen on Fifth Avenue necessarily, but maybe it will. Maybe this is a dry run for this.
Maybe. So, I think the overarching theme here is that more and more information is coming out about the Khashoggi murder. And in context, I think there's one important point to remember. Mm-hmm. A lot of the information we're getting is from Turkey.
Yeah, okay.
All right. The leader of Turkey is not a good guy.
No.
Now he has a very sophisticated, far more sophisticated media shop, which is homegrown, than the Saudis do, which is basically hiring folks in D.C. to do all the PR for them.
Yes, okay. That's a good point.
So when the PR falls apart, the Saudis are left with nothing except leaking what they're going to say in 2 days. And then by the time it comes out, it's already, as Ron Ziegler used to say, inoperative.
Mm. Yeah, that's the case with a lot of Arabian Peninsula government operations. They are very often simply, we can overwhelm this with money.
There's 5 guys running the country. Yeah. They have to outsource a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So
right.
The other side of the coin, though, the not good guys in Turkey are feuding. You have 2 autocrats who are fighting here.
Oh.
And the Turks are very good at this. And what they're doing is just classic brilliance in terms of PR. They're leaking little pieces of the story bit by bit, so every single day you have to pay attention.
Like Trump.
Now, Trump's superpower is understanding American media. He grew up in it. Certainly the tabloids in New York prepared him better for the presidency, for the optics of it, than probably anybody else in history.
That's true,
and
too,
he plays the press like a fiddle. But, again, you have to step back and look at the whole big picture in terms of what's going on with information. Now, getting to the facts, the Wall Street Journal today has Turkey details alleged killing of Saudi journalists. President Trump warns against finding Riyadh guilty until proven innocent, and then links him to Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah, good idea.
Sometimes in the face of kryptonite, your superpowers wane.
You'd think, although, if the superpower is based on sensationalism.
Because, he is like Brett Kavanaugh. And is that an analogy you want to make?
I don't think so. Especially as, by the way, one of the details that emerged was I think they turned the music up in the Saudi consulate.
They did, and so they have tapes of that, and that's what the Wall Street Journal says. So, of course, part of our speculation on Twitter today is what's the best music to dismember somebody with a bone saw?
I don't know.
Is it the soundtrack to A Clockwork Orange? Is it Bach fugues played by E-Power Biggs on the organ? That would be good. That's kind of dramatic music there. Toccata fugue in D minor would work. But I picked one. That's the YouTube that I sent you.
Oh, is that what that was? Okay.
Well, back when I was growing up in New York, there was an ethnic parody singer. We all know Weird Al now, but in those days it was Alan Sherman. His probably most famous song was Hello Mudda, Hello Fada.
Ah, yes.
right? But he did one a parody of C'est si bon, which is called I See Bones.
Okay.
And he plays a doctor who's looking at x-rays, and all he sees is the lovely bones. And it's an upbeat kind of tune, and I think it would go well with dismembering somebody and, trying to cut him into little pieces. And, of course, we have to mention, it seems like the person overseeing this, according to the Wall Street Journal and other sources,
Yes.
was a forensics expert for the Saudis, which to me means he was a doctor.
Yes. Or
bad.
Yeah,
Especially if you have to be a doctor.
Yeah, either somebody who, that's a good question. I don't know what that conjures for me. Either somebody who does
is the assistant, examiner in the morgue, medical examiner,
like who could take somebody apart efficiently, or the other thing that came to mind was a forensics expert. Like, how do we do this and not leave trace evidence behind? Yeah, I don't think they succeeded in that, so it must be the other one.
Yeah, something like that. Wall Street Journal. In an interview with the Associated Press Tuesday, Mr. Trump compared the allegations that Saudi agents had killed Mr. Khashoggi to the accusations of sexual misconduct against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and of course in his mind to himself, who was sworn in last week after a bruising confirmation process. And I'm sure Brett Kavanaugh loves being right in the middle of a story about a gruesome murder where people are dismembered, who says he's innocent. There's no mention of O.J. Simpson, although Mike Pompeo did go to Saudi Arabia to find the real murderer. He could just as well have sent O.J.
Now, as MBS, do you think he's the kind to give tearful testimony?
Well, according to David Ignatius, a different article in the Washington Post, MBS's rampaging anger will not silence questions about Jamal Khashoggi.
It's supposed to.
So you could substitute Trump for MBS there, but it's the same thing. But Ignatius is making the point. Here's his description. Inside his royal palace in Riyadh, Mohammed bin Salman, otherwise known as Mr. Bonesaw, is said to have alternated between dark brooding and rampaging anger in the days after the deaths of Jamal Khashoggi, as Saudi Arabia's crown prince, or MBS as he's widely known, looked for somebody to blame for what Turkish officials have said was the journalist's grisly murder. Mm-hmm. And you look at this and say, well, no wonder he gets along with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So you step back and again say, all right, the Saudis have spent millions, close to billions, on public relations over decades trying to build up the image of the Saudi country and the rulers, friendly to the West, this, that, and everything else. And the whole thing has completely fallen apart in like 4 days.
Yes.
And they have nothing else. And so now all these stories are coming out, not about the sunny Sauds, but rather, the dark side of the ruler. And, the question is going to be, given the strategic importance between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. for a variety of reasons, not least of which is Jared Kushner's plans for Middle East peace, the question on the table is going to be, can Mohammed bin Salman survive this, or is the kingdom going to throw him over the side in order to preserve what's left of relationship with the West?
Good question. They have a lot of princes.
They do. They have more than you can count.
Right. It's not
and
like
they know where they
a
are, too,
Saudi prince embargo or anything. Yeah, they're all over the place, by the way. And a lot of them are over at the Ritz-Carlton still, if you're looking.
Yeah, for a prolonged vacation. A long weekend, as we like to say.
The longest.
At the White House, right? So now the U.S. government learned last month that Major General Ahmed Assiri, the deputy chief of Saudi intelligence, was planning to create a Tiger team to conduct covert special operations, though officials did know the targets. And U.S. intelligence also learned, but only after his disappearance, that the Crown Prince had told his subordinates that he wanted Khashoggi and other Saudi dissidents brought home. So whose name is in this besides Brett Kavanaugh, who's probably not too happy about it? Jared Kushner, president's son-in-law and advisor, urged MBS last weekend to organize an investigation that could identify the culprit. So that PR piece isn't going well. And Kushner's fingerprints are all over this. He's used MBS in Saudi Arabia to help construct Middle East policy. They've already trashed the Iranians, so there's no working with that end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum, since they're deadly rivals, are the Sauds. Kushner threw his lot in with them. MBS bragged that he had Kushner in his back pocket. End of story is that Kushner's fingerprints are all over this, and Trump is saying that, if only we could find the real murderer, And again, it's falling apart. It's turning into a bigger and bigger crisis every day. It is so bad that Lindsey Graham can't defend Trump. That's how bad it is.
What? That's impossible.
Graham going on TV and saying MBS has got to go.
Okay.
Now, the emerging Saudi narrative, according to this piece, is the palace authorized Khashoggi's arrest and interrogation, but something went wrong. The problem is there's audio tapes, if not videotapes. There's definitely audio tapes. And the problem is that that's not going to work. They've already identified 6 or 7 people who were associated with this appearance who happened to be very close to Mohammed bin Salman, Mr. Bonesaw. Yeah. So he can't say, well, I didn't know anything about it when, like, all your advisors are your best friends. So, again, the Wall Street Journal goes on to say the darkening mood inside MBS's palace in recent months shows a crown prince facing economic pressure and tightening a circle of advisors. So things are not so good in King Saudi territory here, Saudi Kingdom territory. And at the same time, things can't be going well for Kushner, whose plans are basically falling apart everywhere. You know, and what was it, 666 Fifth Avenue we decided was the name of the white elephant?
Yes.
Emphasis on white. So, you know, this is Kushner, everything he touches falls apart, just the same way as everything Trump touches falls apart. And the funny thing is they don't get it. They don't realize it.
No.
They think they're doing great because they have all these connections and can write all this stuff out, and it'll just all blow over, as Mitch McConnell famously said. We'll see about that in less than 3 weeks. But this is becoming a bigger crisis every day. The Sauds don't know what to do. The Trump White House doesn't know what to do. They sent Pompeo over for a fact-finding mission. He spent 15 minutes talking to the king and 30 minutes talking to the crown prince. And as a fact-finding mission, it was quite interesting to see that one of his statements was, we're not here to talk about facts.
That's a hell of a mission.
Right. So
it's just a finding
somebody, I guess Blake Hounshell from Politico said, gee, that doesn't do a whole lot for Mike Pompeo's credibility. Mike Pompeo is the guy who said that things are going swimmingly and there's denuclearization going on in North Korea. So again, this is a crisis for the Western press. And what has to be folded into that whole narrative there is the fact that Khashoggi happened to be a reporter for the Washington Post. So now we're talking about it isn't just the little people who are getting stepped on. It's one of our own. And so that's, you know, part of the genesis of the David Ignatius column. And, will not silence questions about Jamal Khashoggi because it's a Washington Post reporter, and reporters see one of their own being threatened, and they are not going to give up on this. And we can talk for shows on end, weeks, about why does it take one of their own to be threatened to get them to understand what's going on with this administration. But it is what it is, and that's what happened. And so we'll see from this point going onward what comes next.
Yeah. Constant criticism of the press, really, although I guess they're not that much different from most people in that sense. They're
not that much different from most people. I mean, think of it.
They have no superpowers.
We see criticism all the time of the Max Boots and the Bill Kristols and the Jen Rubins and the Tom Nichols. What took you so long?
Oh, yes.
That's what our side always says.
Among other things.
It's the wrong thing to say. They're there. That's what matters.
Yes.
And so, yes, we criticize the press about this all the time, but what matters is how they cover this and what they do now. And this is not a story that's going to be knocked off the news by DNA testing or opinions on a scandal that happened in 1980. This is going to be in the news every day.
Unless they're DNA testing the carpet fibers from the consulate.
Well, if you leave it up to the Sauds to do, I don't think so. If you leave it up to the Turks to do, you have to trust the Turks to get the right answer, and I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you might ask now Pompeo, since we're doing the old movie quote thing. I think I'm curious whether Pompeo ever asked Mr. Bonesaw if he's ever been in a Turkish prison. That's what he should have said. I'm here to find out facts. You ever been in a Turkish prison?
Right.
I have not.
An old joke, right? You know,
that's pretty old.
I speak Turkish. You know, towel, prison, taffy.
The Turkish delight. Yes.
Delight. You know,
right?
That's the extent. But again, it's a very interesting regime.
Yes.
And
doubt.
so one has to, take that in context when you hear the reports. Nonetheless, they don't hesitate to report all the details. So this is a tweet I'm reading now from William Gall, U.S. Foreign Policy for Voice of America. Pompeo says Saudis have shown a serious commitment to determine all the facts and ensure accountability.
Oh.
Okay. And the problem with that, of course, is that is anchoring his credibility to Trump's giving the Saudis the benefit of the doubt, says Blancancio. And there's plenty of questions about this. So I don't think that the PR offensive, either from the White House or from Saudi Arabia, is especially working.
No, and they've done a good job in the past. There hasn't been quite this much as starkly on the line as there is this time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, things are happening in a separate way.
Yes.
Paul Krugman, for example, points out, let's be clear, Trump's cover-up for Saudi murder has nothing to do with supposed billions America makes from selling Saudi arms, which shouldn't affect U.S. policy anyway.
And we don't.
It's about the millions he personally makes from Saudi deals.
Yes. That seems true. Where are you reading this?
Now there's no scrutiny on that.
Is that in your roundup today? Or
No,
Okay,
Krugman just
out
tweeted
there.
it, so I'll give you that.
Okay, yes. Sure, pass those on. I like to let everybody see them later on, in case they either get deleted later on or people say, I demand proof. And
Right.
he's innocent of having tweeted this insight until you prove him guilty. Well, okay.
Speaking of insight, Jonathan Chait has one here. Trump, I have a natural instinct for science, and it tells me client scientists are wrong.
What?
So his instincts aren't, unless it's about himself and publicity, his instincts aren't particularly good.
No, that's true. It reminded me, one of the things that really surprised me as you were describing his background and having sort of honed his craft, as it were, the lying, in New York. It's very interesting that the president that you say is, perhaps most prepared for the optics part of the presidency comes out of his dealing with the New York tabloids. What's amazing is that a New York City-based politician who comes out the best position to deal with the national press did so never dealing really with the New York Times. They got all the training they needed to manipulate everyone, including the New York Times, from dealing with the tabloids. I think that's really interesting. The New York Times isn't even the leading source for that sort of training or information or understanding of the national press inside New York City. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Bad news for them, except
Yeah,
they don't care.
absolutely. So that's the background for all of this, and it's going to be the dominant story no matter what the Trump White House wants to do. And his shifting position on it, whether it's saying that he believes MBS because Mr. Bonesaw told him that he didn't do it,
Yes.
or whether it's that, this is just innocent until proven guilty, just like Brett Kavanaugh. He's already stepped in it a bunch of times in the last day or so. So you can imagine that's going to shift as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I did see that. I guess one of his quotes in the middle of all this was, after the initial denials, or he told me he didn't do it. Now it's just down to, well, I asked them and they said it, and I feel like it's true when he said it.
Because my instincts are just as good as they are in climate science.
Yeah, or investing in casinos.
I mean, I have a feel for this.
Or steaks, or vodka, or water, or anything else. Wow. Well, he does run his life by feel, and not always things he's entitled to feel.
Right. So Secretary Pompeo's statement from his own Twitter account. Today, I was in Saudi Arabia where I met with King Salman, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Foreign Minister Al Jubeir, and he got out of there in one piece, so we're happy about that. We had direct and candid conversations. Wednesday, I fly to Ankara to meet with Turkish officials, read my full statement, and Walter Schaub points out this is preposterous. Pompeo was asking Mr. Bonesaw to find out if Mr. Bonesaw ordered the murder. It's an absurdly obvious ruse. But Pompeo isn't stupid, so ask yourself why he would feel the need to behave this way. It's almost as if his boss failed to divest conflicting financial interests.
Oh, well, that might explain it. That'd be part of it. Yeah, I guess, unless maybe he's going for the Code Red moment you were hoping for. You are goddamn right, I ordered cornbread. Perhaps they might say in their accent, if they're not really actually that heavily accented, those guys.
Right. You want me on this wall.
And there's not even a wall.
I don't think so. Well, who paid for that wall? So we got the break coming up, and maybe we'll talk a little politics afterwards.
Okay.
There's
you think that's appropriate?
A David Brooks column making the rounds, The Rich White Civil War, a smarter look at America's divide. We'll talk about that after the break.
Okay.
And continuing Blue Wave, looking at the House.
Oh, wait a second. I've started the music because you've said that to me, and I realized, wait a second, I have another minute before I am supposed to do that. My alarm, I should listen to that.
All right. Well, it's all about who votes, right? We got less than 3 weeks, and
Yes.
the electorate's totally different if millennials and youngins show up. And that's really going to be the story of this election.
Someone was saying, was Nate Silver saying this morning that he thought that would really pan out, perhaps?
That this time might, in fact, be different. Young voters might actually show up at the polls this year,
Okay.
says Jeff Skelly, writing at 538.
Right.
And that's interesting. It's not even Nate. It's just that Nate's shop. I'll send you a copy of that, and we'll talk about it after the break.
Okay, fine. Well, that gives us now 15 seconds to wait until the music comes on properly.
It's your show, your problem.
I could have turned it on, and I guess we could have run it for a minute.
It's great music.
It's very exciting. I don't know how long.
Or you could play the YouTube Bones story.
That would have been good. Although, like I said, that creates problems.
It'll get
with
you
YouTube
banned
later on.
But, that's all right.
Yeah, but I'm, there's a problem. I'm pulling in so much money from YouTube. I can't possibly disrupt that. Oh wait, 0. I forgot. I'm free to do whatever I want. However, I think the 50 or so people who depend apparently on downloading it from YouTube each day might find themselves disappointed. But I think we'll manage to deal with it. Maybe we can sneak it in, and maybe I can cut it up with a bone saw and put it in pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and I can answer your question now, Greg. Now that we're back, and I've had my pause, we were discussing over the break, what did we do yesterday? Where was Armando? Armando had stopped in yesterday. He was drawn in by the outlandish story of Simona Mangiante. That's George Papadopoulos' wife.
That's the one
who
who faked her age on her passport.
Yeah, interestingly, faked her age on a picture of her passport. Because she's a lawyer, she knows you're not supposed to fake your age on your passport. But she still needed to fake her age in order to show how serious and truth-telling she is. So she faked her age on a picture of her passport, which was supposed to be evidence that she wasn't a Russian spy, except that it doesn't apply in any way, and that manipulating that kind of information with Photoshop actually suggests you are a spy. So,
yeah, except for that.
Weird.
Okay. Well, that's an
That's what we
piece.
did yesterday. Today, we're talking about cutting journalists into pieces.
Yeah.
And
not just slicing them up on Twitter. We're talking about actually physically in the real world, in meat space, doing bone saw stuff.
Yeah.
And again, a story not going away. But in the meantime, Jeff Skelly,
Yes.
who, by the way, he's an elections analyst at 538. I follow him on Twitter. He's very good. Young voters might actually show up at the polls this year, and if it's too long and you didn't read it, here's the deal. Traditionally, young people don't vote in midterms. Everybody knows that. And yet, for all the special elections in 2017, they turned out really well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That would be, I would imagine, even lower turnout for young people.
Right. There's looking at the historical trends. There's no question, he writes, that youth voter turnout is consistently low in midterms, but exit poll data from competitive statewide elections in 2017, like in Virginia, for example, suggests that 2018 could set a record high for young voter participation. And of course, David's from Virginia, and I got a lot of friends in Virginia. I like to remind people of that. So I always keep a especially close eye on that state.
Okay.
Glad you didn't get hit by the hurricane that was more south of you.
Yeah.
Where 500,000 people in Virginia lost power for a few days.
Well, that's pretty serious. It's a big place.
What is a big place? Let's look at some of the evidence, says Jeffrey.
All right.
The Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement at Tufts University. Boy, is that a mouthful. The CFIAROCLE at Tufts University, which researches the political engagement of young Americans, estimated 23% of 18 to 29-year-olds turned out in Alabama's special election for U.S. Senate, well above the 11% of that age group previously estimated turnout. By the way, that stands for CIRCLE, CIRCLE, Circle at Tufts University.
Really?
So 11% usually turn out, but 23% did for Doug Jones.
Okay. That's still not a lot.
That's pretty good.
But it's
Circle also estimated 34% of 18 to 29-year-olds turned out to vote in Virginia's gubernatorial election last year, far exceeding the group's 2014 turnout of 13%.
Okay.
Right?
Good.
What's more, in early October, and this is late October, Circle released its own large sample survey from the pollster GFK that found that 34% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they were extremely likely to vote. 34%. That's close to the levels of engagement seen in the 26th presidential election. If they show, blue wave.
All right. I'll take it.
Then we have John, the pollster, name's escaping me, Della Volpe, at the Harvard Kennedy School of Institute of Politics, IOP, gives us reason to believe we may see high turnout from young voters. The Institute conducts a long-running, large sample poll of young Americans, and it's specifically surveyed 18 to 29-year-olds since 2009. Previously, 34% was the high mark, who said they would definitely vote, and in their spring survey, they got 37% definitely vote, which is a new record high. Now, Della Volpe says the IOP's fall 2018 poll won't come out until the end of October. He says a new poll conducted by his company, Social Sphere, found 34% of 18 to 29-year-olds said they would definitely vote, similar to the 37% finding in the spring. This is substantially higher than what Gallup reported. Gallup isn't turning out to be not a particularly good pollster, by the way, and higher than what the IOP found in his fall polls conducted immediately before the 2010-2014 midterms, 27 and 26. So now we're up to 37 or 34, in that range, which suggests younger voters could turn out at a relatively high rate in November. And if that's the case, of course, we don't know, but data suggests it's possible. And if young people do turn out, it'll be hard not to give President Trump much of the credit. After all, IOP's spring 2018 poll found that 72% of 18 to 29-year-olds disapproved of him, and 58% preferred that Democrats take control of Congress. That's why it's important for them to go. So it may be that worrying about millennials is wrong. Worrying about Latinas coming out might be correct. They are a group that doesn't necessarily vote in proportion to their numbers. No. But, of course, it's a very, very mixed population.
That's true, too.
Older, conservative, voters are among that population. And just look to Florida to see the difference between how the Cubans vote and how the Puerto Ricans vote and how generationally they vote differently. So it's very difficult to make any conclusions as a whole. There are a lot of barriers to voting. And it's not always a personal choice. It's got nothing to do with laziness. Right. It has a great deal to do with being able to get to the polls, getting registered. You need help. We see that in Nevada because the hotel unions are terrific at helping to mobilize that population and help them. And you need that kind of help in order to get to the polls.
Yes. Also, it would help if you were not afraid of being arrested.
Well, that does make it difficult, doesn't it?
Yes.
And, of course, that's the intent.
Yes, right. That's why they arrest you and why they arrest people for whom there are no grounds whatsoever for arrest, to scare other people who would ordinarily believe that they are safe from arrest into worrying about it all of a sudden.
Meanwhile, again, House and Senate going in different directions. A new poll shows in New York Times, which is Republican running. The polls have been leaning Republican the last couple of cycles of their live polling that they're doing, mostly because they're polling Senate races. So in their ongoing hasn't finished poll, McSally has a 4-point lead over Sinema. Whether that holds or whether that doesn't hold remain to be seen. Again, the New York Times Siena poll has noted they are having trouble reaching younger voters to make that point. And at the same time, Morning Consult has a poll out. It keeps getting harder for Republicans to separate from Trump. Trump's lack of popularity among Democrats and independents may become a bigger issue for down-ballot candidates. Most voters see little difference between Trump and D.C. Republicans.
That's wise.
So if Republican means Trump and Trump means Republican and Trump is unpopular, that does not help.
No, although he insists that he is helping, so I guess he can continue to believe that. I do hope people will show, and that the fact that the New York Times can't get a hold of them is more a reflection of the way young people view polling, or just being interrupted during their day by phone calls from unknown numbers.
Yeah, especially if it's on their cell phone and they have to pay for it.
Yeah, so that ain't happening. Well,
I don't take calls on my cell phone that I don't know, and I get a ton of them because I figure they're either fundraising or scams or stuff that I don't want to pay for that call. So I totally get that. You live in Barbara Comstock's district?
I do. Well, it's not really hers; it's mine.
Virginia 10?
Yes.
And have you seen the Barbara Trumpstock ad?
No, I
that
haven't.
Jennifer Wexton is doing. She's using an ad to brand vulnerable Republican Representative Barbara Comstock as Barbara Trumpstock, just to make the point.
She should come over and show it to me.
Here in Connecticut, I could see Ned Lamont doing that to the Republican he's running against for governor, and it's fairly effective. The Republican ads are Ned Lamont's going to raise your taxes.
What?
And the Democratic ads are, this guy is a Trump guy.
Yeah.
And basically, that's how they're running the campaign. And in Connecticut, that means Lamont has about a 7-point lead.
Well, good. It should work. This
over
is the way
Bob
things should go.
Stefanowski, who is the Trumpy guy running for governor.
Trump's gross. People should do that. There should be an answer on there instead of approve, disapprove. I wonder what would happen if you just did your poll with, like, if you're especially polling younger voters and allow them to answer that they loathe President Trump.
Right. So in answer to this, Jesse Hunt, a spokesman for the Republican National Congressional Committee, said Tuesday that Republican candidates are running localized races talking about issues that are important to their districts, like Brett Kavanaugh.
Okay, well.
Which is what they're doing, because the Democrats are running on health care and the Republicans are running on, we got Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court and they didn't like him.
Yeah.
And so, again, we'll see how that works.
Well,
that's exactly what's happening with McCaskill and Hawley.
Yeah. Well, in some places that actually, I guess, makes sense. But, we'll see.
Well, it does. And again, that's why the Senate and House are going in different directions. So, for people who are saying that the House looks more and more blue, that's true even when you can't reach the millennials. If you can, even more blue. In the Senate, it looks like it's trending red. But again, if you're not reaching the millennials, that may not be as true as it appears. And Nate Silver, the actual Nate Silver, not just somebody writing on a site, said the other day, people really need to step back and look a little bit about what these narratives from the media actually mean, because a lot of them are crap. And as an example, he talks about Beto O'Rourke in Texas, whose chances have gone from 35% to 25%.
Yeah.
Is that different? No. But Silver makes the point, but to the media, it's the difference between being tied at 35 to 65 to completely losing and having no chance, 75-25. It's the same story. The polls aren't that different. But the media narrative has completely changed because of the difference between 35 and 25, which is ridiculous because they're essentially the same number, is his point.
Interesting. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I think that's a fairly substantial change in the numbers most people would think, but then they don't.
It is, but the point is he didn't really have a great chance before.
There we are.
And they were calling it, just about tied. And now they're saying they have no chance. That's also wrong.
Wow.
If the millennials show up, he does have a chance.
Wrong to wronger. Okay. Well, show up.
So, you go from being, look, don't say that he has, he's going to win when his chances is only 35%. And don't say he's going to lose when he's got a 25% chance of proving the polls wrong if the millennials show up.
I guess that's
and
true,
new voters
too.
show up, and people who you don't consider to be part of your likely voter screen show up.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the big deal. And then, of course, Trump wasn't given great odds either. They always say that.
Yeah, his odds are around 35%. So that's enough to win is the point. And, that doesn't mean he will, because most of the time you don't, but sometimes you do.
Yeah.
And therefore,
really
for
get down
pundits
to it.
who have to be sure about everything and are never wrong, I won't name names, it's very difficult to have uncertainty in saying we don't really know.
Yeah, that's hard for them. Well, statistics are a weird science, and that's true. I mean, I guess sitting there and saying even 35 or 25% chance of winning, I know everybody says, well, that's not zero, but I guess if you think about it, you run 100, run those 100 trials and everything. Well, okay, sure, most of them come out the other way, but winning in 25 to 35 simulations is not nothing. You won 35 times. I'd say you're still in the race.
Right. So speaking of simulations, right now today, as of this morning, forecasting the race for the House on Nate Silver's site, 6 and 7 chance Democrat control, 84.5%, and 15.5% that the Republicans keep control. Now, 85-15 is substantial, and a 15% chance is quite different than a 35% chance, but it's not a certainty until you get that down to 2%.
Yes.
So it's still a little bit uncertainty there. And in the Senate, the Democrats have a better chance of taking the Senate than Republicans do of holding the House. Put it that way.
Yes.
A 1 in 5 chance the Democrats will win control, 19%, and 81% chance Republicans keep control.
Yes. All right. Well, that is
All right? And that's not changing, really. That's about where it's been. It's been below 25% since the beginning of the month, whereas the Democratic chance of gaining the House is actually gaining a little bit. And what Nate Silver sees is happening to the Senate is something like a 52-48 split. So basically they pick up one seat. If we get the House and the Senate gets one more Republican senator, that's not a bad night for us, especially if we do well in governor and legislative races statewide.
Yes.
I'd like to keep it 51-49, and my big dream is 50-50.
Yeah.
I think that's about the best to expect. But 48-52 is not unrealistic.
Yeah, and it's not great either for Republicans and still keeps them in a position of,
they can only lose a couple of votes.
Yeah, it still leaves a couple of people who like to stand around and pretend they're not going to vote with their party.
Yeah, but it's different when you're getting legislation out of the House that forces you to a different position.
Yeah, so there'll be, I assume, less votes happening on the floor of the Senate, leaving them even more time to pack the judiciary. They'll still be doing nothing. But people will begin to see the news of things passing the House and not having any action taken in the Senate, and that makes some difference, particularly when you can have it on discrete issues that there's overwhelming support for elsewhere. It makes a difference. Going into the next election cycle with a presidential race on the ticket as well, and the 2020 Senate races, people who will have been sitting on their hands doing nothing while the House clamors for action are going to have to answer for that. Okay.
Well, another interesting thing just to think about.
All right.
And Dave Byler over at Weekly Standard has published this, and he says there's no clear relationship between the midterm losses and what happens in the next presidential election. Right? Sometimes, let's say the Republicans do lose the House. Mm-hmm. That doesn't predict what happens in 2020. There's just no relationship whatsoever. Sometimes you lose in the midterm and then win in the general. And sometimes you win both and sometimes you lose both. There's just no correlation. But what's interesting to me is that there's almost, and I had this discussion with David, there's a 2-track way of thinking about this. Track one is Mueller doesn't exist, nothing new comes out, it's the same old, and then we're in 2020. Mm-hmm. Where Trump's position is still bad, but a little bit better than the other scenario, which is Mueller comes up with a ton of stuff, And new crises like Mr. Bonesaw come up linking Trump as an accessory to murder that spoil the election even further. And there's just no way, since the baseline is that there's no relationship between what happens in the midterm in 2020. You really can't figure out what's going to happen in the midterms when you don't account for things like Mueller and, assuming like I do that he's guilty of everything that everybody's charged him of. How do we know that? Because he accuses other people of doing it, and that's your tell.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does. We've got that going for us.
So if you're going to look at the next cycle, don't even go there. I don't care about Elizabeth Warren's DNA. She's going to run. That doesn't mean she's going to be a strong candidate. Right now, Joe Biden is lapping the field in terms of who people want. That doesn't mean that he's going to be the candidate, even though Trump fears him the most, because Biden has the potential to go into the same voter pool that Trump uses, which is independents who lean Republican, that Biden may be able to poach from. And yet, if millennials show up in this election and win it for the Democrats, that's a completely different target group that Biden isn't necessarily well positioned to do. And Warren necessarily isn't either. So somebody new may be coming out of that. And then you got the dark horses like Amy Klobuchar and others who are just running a completely different campaign than what we're seeing right now with Trump and Avenatti yelling at each other.
Yes. And don't talk about people in terms of horses.
Well, that's always bad.
Yes.
But we'll see how bad in less than 3 weeks.
I guess so. We didn't even get to that.
I want to ask who Carly Fiorina is voting for. Or at least, who her face is voting for.
Yes. Well, I assume.
It's her face that Trump insulted during the primaries.
Yes. Well, everybody's face eventually gets insulted by Donald Trump, which is astounding given, what Donald Trump's face looks like.
Yeah.
But we have to put up with this, apparently.
Let alone his hair, let alone his tie, let alone the rest of him.
Right.
So I think I'll leave you there. There was a column by David Brooks about how the Civil War right now in politics is the rich white liberals versus the rich white conservatives, and the vast majority of everybody else being in the middle. But that's one of those both sides things that I don't always take completely seriously.
Well, that is how wars go.
Hey, I'll tell you one before we go that I think is terrific.
Okay.
That I didn't send to you, except
that now.
I can't because the place I put it, Thread Reader app, isn't working right now.
Oh. Tell me about it.
So
I'll search.
I'll
you won't? All right. Well, if you figure it out later on, send it along, and maybe if we get stuck because, there's no news, I can read it.
Well, you got Joan today, so that'll help.
But, yes,
if
right.
I don't do it
Wednesday.
today,
That's
I
right.
will certainly do it tomorrow. It's about Sears, the store.
Do
you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah,
how
we
it
read
started?
this. We were reading one yesterday. Is it from the historian, the guy who teaches the history of consumerism?
Yes.
We read it
I
at
put
the
that
very
aside
end.
because I just thought it was fantastic.
It was. Luckily, we've covered
readers
it.
and listeners aren't knowing what we're talking about, but basically this guy goes through the history of the Sears catalog and how important it was in the Jim Crow South, because if you were black and you went to the store, you got put at the end of the line, and maybe they would help you with credit and maybe they wouldn't. But there were just all sorts of small ways you got smacked down for just being black while shopping.
Yes.
But the Sears catalog made that all go away, and therefore store owners in the South hated Sears.
It's so strange that they actually took offense to it, too. I mean, I can understand why black shoppers would be thrilled to have Sears. It's amazing that the white shop owners like, wait a minute, I don't get to abuse black people? This is a terrible problem. Versus, I have a competition.
Okay, I found it.
All right.
Louis Hyman.
Yes.
Who is historian of capitalism and other fun stuff. That's his official title, by the way.
Yeah.
Historian of capitalism and other. He's the full professor of historian of capitalism and other fun stuff. Associate professor of history, director, Institute for Workplace Studies, New York City. And here's what he says. Where? I was asked a lot.
Show.
The Sears thing.
I
accidentally clicked on his name, and then the whole thread that I was looking at went away. There it is. In my history of consumption class, I teach about Sears, but what most people don't know is just how radical the catalog was in the era of Jim Crow. Every time a black Southerner went to the local store, they were confronted with forced deference to white customers who would be served first. And the store would be filled with racist caricatures of black people in an effort to sell to white people. And they used the classic examples of a January 1917 calendar with Aunt Jemima pancake flour and a horribly racist, big lips, big mouth picture of Aunt Jemima.
Yeah.
The stores were not self-service, so the black customers would have to wait and then would have to ask the proprietor to give them goods, often on credit because sharecropping. And the landlord often owned the store, and in every way shopping reinforced hierarchy until Sears. The catalog undid the power of the storekeeper and, by extension, the landlord. Black families could buy without asking permission, without waiting, without being watched, with national cheap prices. Southern storekeepers fought back. They organized catalog bonfires in the street. This is history.
Amazing.
This is not like making it up.
Yes.
These general stores often doubled as post offices. The owners would refuse to sell stamps to black people or money orders to use the catalog services. So it happened enough that Sears instructed customers to evade the postmaster and speak to the mail carrier. Just give the letter and the money to the mail carrier. He'll get the money order at the post office and mail the letter for you.
I can't believe that worked.
And they gave instructions on how to do this. And they would send the catalog to any address free. You didn't have to pay postage.
Oh.
In an attempt to undermine Sears, rumors spread that Sears was black to get white customers to stop buying from them. Sold by mail, these fellows could not afford to show their faces as retailers, quote unquote. Sears, in turn, published photos to prove he was white. These rumors didn't affect sales, but show how race and commerce connected in the countryside and how dangerous it was to the local order, to white supremacy, to have national markets. So, as we think about Sears today, let's think about how retail is not just about buying things, but part of a larger system of power. We know that. We organize boycotts against Fox News when they're especially egregious. Mm-hmm. Every act of power contains the opportunity and the means for resistance. And frankly, that's how Bill O'Reilly got thrown off the air. Not because he was bad, but because of consumer boycotts. I added that. He didn't say that.
Okay. Well, you're better than he is.
Wow, so much response. If you would like to know more about the larger history of Sears and resisting white supremacy, check out this video from our series on the history of capitalism. Wow. And it's, of course, YouTube, so you can't play it.
No.
You may have noticed that race and capitalism were not just problems in the 19th century. As I write about, African Americans have always had a less equal access to market, whether as consumers or as workers. Or, as consumers, I mean, products for black folks. Mm-hmm. Like Brill Cream, 1950s hair gel for men.
Yes.
I don't know, not necessarily the product that, and that there are non-white personal products available now wasn't always the truth. Wasn't always the, availability.
In this case, true also. Yeah, that's another thing we didn't get to that part about it, but it really was an eye-opener. I thought.
History's good. I always like learning things I didn't know.
Yeah. Bonfires with the catalog. That's a pretty amazing thing to do.
And the good news is that carries you almost till 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So.
And all they want to do is just buy stuff. And they objected. That's weird.
So I have to go back and look at Twitter and see who else has been dismembered by a bonesaw during the time I've been on the show. But
we can do that nationally now. Anybody, no matter what color.
Yeah. But in any case, this is Greg Dworkin talking to my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. His show.
I'm here.
He just leases me time.
Right. Ooh.
And, we'll be back tomorrow and we'll see what happens between now and then. But David Ignatius is right. The anger in Washington over the dismemberment of a reporter is not about to go away.
No. I wonder how things are over at the museum today.
Yeah.
Just curious. Okay. Thanks, Greg.
All righty. Take care.
That does carry me all the way to 10 o'clock. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll see Joan shortly. Many things to catch up on. If you were looking to catch up on that thread about Sears, well, you got your chance to do that as well. That really was a hell of a story. I might have to, I don't know, if I can't take that class, I don't think. Can I? Sometimes now I find out there are companies dedicated to videotaping prominent professors with particularly fascinating lectures and selling those as well. So I guess it's entirely possible. What an interesting thing. And of course, in book form, well, I can threaten to catch up on it by buying the book. I'm just not a particularly good reader. Oh, okay, there are videos. Well, in that case, that's right. You told me that I could violate YouTube copyright. I'll just have to listen to it after the show is over. So none of you will be any of the wiser that I did that, and YouTube won't be upset with me for violating someone else's copyright. Nor should you do that anyway. because I'm sure he's worked hard and put a lot of effort into producing those videos, and I don't want to take anything away from him on that. All right. What else have we to discuss in the few minutes, A, before our break, and B, before hearing from Joan? Let's see. Big story today, a second installment in the ProPublica driven series, I guess. Did they cooperate with the authors of the previous investigation of Trump's long-term tax fraud? Were they in on it? Is this like the next installment of this? I have this here from ProPublica's site, Pump and Trump, which is maybe not what you think, but seems to be the hot story this morning, which will be, I guess, the next one to fade quickly into obscurity because, oh my God, I can't believe it. People either can't or won't follow complex tax cheating stories for whatever reason. And, it's hard to compete, I guess, with dismemberment and or having sex with porn stars and paying them off. But it's there nonetheless, and so I thought I'd bring you up to speed on it. Donald Trump claims he only licensed his name for real estate projects developed by others. That's the beginning of the subheader of the Pump and Trump headline. But an investigation of a dozen Trump deals shows deep family involvement in projects that often involved deceptive practices. And that's the key issue here, deceptive practices. Heather Vogel at ProPublica, along with Andrea Bernstein and Meg Kramer at WNYC, and Peter Elkind, who's also at ProPublica, but for some reason gets listed separately and second and at the end of that list. On this piece released today, we will perhaps dive into the first couple paragraphs of that, and maybe it's something Joan wants to continue to discuss. But I gather that there's much more going on, and we absolutely need to get an explainer from her about what's been happening the last couple of days in the Senate. All right, well, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here in Netroots Radio. I might as well remind myself that that's what I'm doing, and I need to pay attention to it. That break got a little bit screwy on us, but at least we had some music. And in case I got cut off in the last second, that last word was Senate. I think I just managed to squeeze that in perhaps before the break, but just saying, when Joan gets here, I'm going to want an explainer on what's been going on in the last couple of days in the Senate, in particular in the Senate Judiciary Committee. I am not clear on exactly how this whole thing went down, but it comes down to this. Apparently, in hashing through the deal that was put together, the unanimous consent agreement, we didn't really discuss this very much, I don't think. We talked a little bit about it on Twitter, and maybe you happen to catch a little bit of discussion about that. I'll wait for Joan to come on and help us clear this one up, but lots of moving parts to this one. And I think the big moving part here is that basically they struck a deal, and then it turns out that, surprise, Grassley and McConnell didn't actually agree to hold up their end of the bargain. So let's find out about that when we talk with Joan later on in the few minutes we've got until then, and perhaps several more. No rush. I know you got stuff to do, Joan, and we got plenty of stuff to talk about as well, though we always miss you when you're not around. Let's talk about this Pump and Trump thing and see if we can get a flavor for it in the first couple paragraphs. Since Donald Trump's fortunes came surging back with the success of The Apprentice, 14 years ago, his deals have often been scrutinized for the large number of his partners who have ventured to the very edges of the law and sometimes beyond. Interesting. Those associates have included accused money launderers, alleged funders of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and a felon who slashed someone in the face with a broken margarita glass. Felix, I know that's you. Trump and his company have typically countered by saying they were merely licensing his name on these real estate projects in exchange for a fee and a bone saw. They weren't the developers or in any way responsible. But an 8-month investigation by ProPublica and WNYC reveals that the post-millennium Trump business model is different from what has been previously reported. That would be problematic. And by the way, keep in mind that his kids, to the extent that his kids have anything, any experience in the business, it's all in this post-millennial business model. Everything they've got is this corrupt crap. So just keep that in mind as people continue to say stupid things like, maybe Ivanka could run for office one day. I don't know. Maybe it'll make a difference for her in a way it didn't for her dad. But okay, so the Trump business model is different from what was previously reported, i.e., oh my goodness, he's a liar. That's weird. The Trumps were typically way more than mere licensors or bystanders in their often troubled deals. They were deeply involved in these projects. They helped mislead investors and buyers, and that's a big deal normally, and they profited handsomely from it. And I don't really know how handsomely they actually profited, but more than you and me. Patterns of deceptive practices occurred in a dozen deals across the globe as the business expanded into international projects, and the Trumps often participated. One common pattern visible in more than half of these transactions was a tendency to misstate key sales numbers. In other words, this is truthful hyperbole, as Trump put it. That's the cover code that he used for it. I lied. It's mere puffery. I just make up crap. Whatever it takes to sell units of whatever the hell we're doing, that's what I say. And who cares? It's not like it's some high tribunal. That sums it all up. In interviews and press conferences, Ivanka Trump gave false figures for projects in Mexico's Baja California, Panama City, Panama, Toronto, and New York's Soho neighborhood. These statements weren't just the legendary Trump hype. They misled potential buyers about the viability of the developments. Another pattern. Donald Trump repeatedly misled buyers about the amount or existence of his ownership in projects in Tampa, Florida, Panama, Baja, and elsewhere. For a tower planned in Tampa, for example, Trump told a local paper in 2005 that his ownership would be less than 50%. But it's a substantial stake. I recently said I'd like to increase my stake, but when they're selling that well, they don't let you do that. In reality, Trump had no ownership stake in the project. The Trumps, and by the way, if you're wondering why that's an issue besides telling the truth, for investors, it makes a difference. Well, let's say for stupid investors, like people who would buy into a Trump project because it's a Trump project, right? If you're the sort of person that says, Trump, he's got the Midas touch. He knows what luxury living is all about. And if he's not only saying it, but personally invested, why, he's a financial genius. I seen it on TV, right? Now, those aren't going to be your investors, but okay. People who think that he's a savvy businessman because they're editing The Apprentice to make it look like he's a savvy businessman. And he's got books that are called things like Deals and Rich and all that sort of thing, words that are in there, keywords that make you think he knows what he's talking about. Well, if he's put his own money into it, if he's so sure that he's even taken a not 50% stake, but a large and substantial stake and wants more, well then, I'm going to want more too, because I want to go where the money is. He knows where it is. I'm following him. That's a classic, pump and dump type strategy. A classic securities fraud strategy is to try and manipulate people into believing that smart money is going one way or another and then invite them to do the same. And then it doesn't turn out to be true. That's fraud. That's problematic. And you normally you get in trouble for it. Not with him. The Trumps often made money even when the projects failed. Though that's no different from, brokerages we make money even when your investments fail. And when they tanked, the Trumps simply ignored their prior claims of close involvement, denied any responsibility, and walked away. I love it. I'm heavily invested in it. I personally want even more of it. I'm doing this whole thing personally. Oh, it just failed. I have nothing to do with it. I never heard of it. This whole office tower, this whole residential building is just a coffee boy. You've seen it before. And you're seeing it right now. Same pattern. He runs the country the same way. We needed a businessman to run the country like a business. And that's what he's doing. He's running it just like he ran his businesses, which was a terrible model, and denies responsibility for everything when it fails. But in the meantime, tries to get you to invest in it by telling you how wonderful it is. The Trumps often made money even when projects failed, right? Then they denied responsibility when things go south, walk away. The cycle is exemplified in Panama City and also the United States of America, where Trump is president. Exemplified in Panama City, where the Trumps were involved in a project to build a massive tower and complex known as the Trump Ocean Club. The project's unfortunate turns included bankruptcy. That's pretty unfortunate. Then years later, the forcible ejection of the Trump organization from managing the hotel. That's definitely bad. There, as elsewhere, oh my goodness, look at this picture of the kids here. They're so young and unplastic surgeried. It's really remarkable, this photo they have of Ivanka and Don Jr. here. They look like completely different people. In 2006, it's really remarkable what they've done. Okay, but, people age in funny ways. All right, there as elsewhere, Tampa, the Trump organization disclaimed responsibility. It emphasized that it had merely licensed the Trump name to developers who handled everything from construction to marketing. The Trump organization was not the owner, developer, or seller of the Trump Ocean Club Panama project. Panama City, this is not Tampa, I'm sorry. It said in a statement last year, because of its limited role, the company was not responsible for the financing of the project and had no involvement in the sale of units. Now this all begins to make more sense. I was like, they were forcibly ejected from managing the hotel in Tampa and Panama City? No, just Panama City. We actually remember that story. We discussed it on the air here, too. That one was kind of weird. Well, so here's Trump saying they're not responsible for anything and they have no involvement in the sale of units. Well, that was false. For starters, Trump arranged financing, his promised commission, $2.2 million or more, by bringing in the investment bank Bear Stearns, which issued the bonds that paid for the Panama project's construction. Trump touted himself as a partner of the developer. His daughter Ivanka briefly boasted that she had personally sold 40 units. A broker on the project said he couldn't remember her selling even one. Meanwhile, Ivanka told the journalist, and I'm sure Jared is privately appalled about that, by the way. Meanwhile, Ivanka told the journalist at the time that, quote, over 90%, unquote, of the Panama units had sold and at prices 5 times as high as comparable buildings. Both statements untrue. I need a buzzer. Not only were the Panama sales figures inflated, but many purchases turned out to be an illusion. And that was no coincidence. The building's financing depended on obtaining advance commitments from buyers, often before concrete had started pouring. But in between the sale of the bonds in 2007 and 2013, and the year that the building went bankrupt, buyers of 458 units in the 1,000-unit building abandoned their purchase contracts. Those buyers forfeited more than $50 million in deposits, and that's not a bad thing for the organization, I guess, and they never took possession of finished units. Given that the buyers were often shadowy shell companies or other paper entities, it was nearly impossible to discern who the actual purchasers were, let alone why they backed out. And now that's interesting, too. Like, on the one hand, okay, you have 1,000 units in the building. About half of them abandoned their purchase contracts, and they forfeit $50 million in deposits, which I'm sure the Trump organization looked on as a relatively good thing. Like, I guess you could say it's bad for us in that people are backing out of purchase contracts. That doesn't look so good. But they did leave $50 million behind, and I like money, and 50 million monies is a good thing to have. So they, one, will simply lie about anybody abandoning anything. And 2, they may not really have been abandoning anything. You should probably keep this in mind. Given that the buyers were often shadowy shell companies or other paper entities, for one thing, people weren't particularly necessarily motivated to complete their sales contracts rather than abandon things, because these were, shell companies that they could write off losses for. Or 2, it may have been the idea all along. I will contract with you. Here's a great way to launder money, or a great way to bribe you into agreeing to launder on an even grander scale if you're worried about ever getting caught. How about if I contract to buy a couple $1 million worth of units in your building and then withdraw from it, abandon the contract, but you get to keep the money? I don't care, because all I'm looking for is a less legally troublesome way to put a briefcase with $2 million in it on your desk, right? And if I do it that way, I could get caught or have it called a bribe. Whereas if I say, give me $2 million worth of Trump units in some apartment building in Panama where I never go, right? And then just say, change my mind. Oh, you forfeit the $2 million deposit. Yeah, that's life. The $2 million briefcase still ends up on your desk, but I get to claim if I'm ever caught. No, it wasn't a bribe. It was I was buying some units and then my financing fell apart and I couldn't do it. So don't lose sight of that as a possibility too. Anyway, so it was nearly impossible to discern who the actual purchasers were, let alone why they backed out or if they were ever interested in the first place. Trump licensed his name for an initial fee of $1 million, but that was just the beginning of the revenue streams. A lengthy and varied assortment that granted him a piece of everything from sales of apartment units to a cut of minibar sales. Wow, that's cheap. And was notable for the myriad ways in which both success and failure triggered payments to him. Now, why would you agree to such a contract? Again, it's because you are interested in laundering money more so than actually earning it by selling people a product that they might want. But that's the cover story for the laundering. So you try to keep up appearances. And, yeah, you're willing to pay a premium for that. And Trump has a reputation of not getting caught by police anyway. Even if he gets sued a lot, the thing people are worried about is getting caught by police. And that seems to be a non-issue for him to date. Consider the final accounting. The article continues, in the wake of the project's bankruptcy, a 50% default rate, and his company's expulsion from managing the hotel, Donald Trump walked away with between $30 million and $55 million. Lots of briefcases on his desk. The Trump Organization did not respond to a long list of questions about its transactions. The White House didn't have any comment. Trump's licensing strategy originated with his early 2000s comeback as The Apprentice, propelled him to international TV stardom, and restored luster to a reputation tarnished by multiple bankruptcies. As Trump put it in one promotional video during that period, when the first season of The Apprentice finally finished shooting, I was able to get back to my core business, real estate, and I've made some really incredible deals. That strategy is still playing out today. The Trump Organization, which pledged not to launch new projects during the Trump presidency, is, guess what? Aggressively pursuing existing ones, including in the Dominican Republic, Indonesia, and India. And P.S. starting new ones. I don't know why they bothered to leave that out. Some long-assumed beliefs about Trump are being reinvestigated, with surprising results. This month, the New York Times published a 13,000-word examination of how Donald's father, the late Fred Trump, and his estate funneled millions of dollars to his children in possible violation of tax rules and criminal laws, with copious documentation showing that Fred directed $413 million in today's dollars to Donald, not the single loan of $1 million, the small loan of $1 million with interest that Donald had always claimed. It exploded Trump's long-propagated claim that he's a self-made man. This article examines another Trump claim, that his post-millennium comeback and global expansion rested on the brilliant purity of a licensing strategy that paid him millions simply for the use of his name. That, it turns out, is no truer than the notion that Donald Trump is self-made. So, that's the gist of the rest of this article. There's no way I would be able to fit all of this into today's show or really over the course of several days. But I wanted to at least give you a flavor of what you were going to get in this piece. And I recommend then that you read through it on your own. And if you don't feel too bad, because at some point I'm going to want to discuss this on the air too, because there's a lot of people and a lot of weird names that pop up in here that I think are part of the rogues gallery that we're going to want to add those names and mention them so that we can come back to it later on and say, remember that guy? Yeah, now he's involved in this other corrupt-looking operation elsewhere, and gee whiz, what a coincidence that is. All right, well, we'll leave things there for the moment. Let's see, there were also a few other items. Oh, let's see here, if I can call some of these up. And I am not sure if I can find this morning. I was originally considering ignoring this story entirely, and now I'm thinking that I might, let's see if I can find it. We're expecting to hear from Joan. She just sent me a note, so she'll be on shortly. As a matter of fact, here she comes now, though she may have to call a quick end to today's segment. But hey, good morning, Joan. How are you?
Good morning, Kagro. I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. I was just thinking about, I got to search back, see if I can find it. But I understand there was a piece in the Washington Post today in which somebody decided that it would be a fun idea to simply say that Donald Trump is actually the most honest president we've ever had. I don't know if you
I
happen to
believe
see
it was
this.
Meghan McArdle.
That sounds like it's pretty likely, but
I think that was the one. I saw something about that this morning.
yeah, I thought that was an interesting idea. But of course, then the second line says, well, and don't get me wrong, he lies all the time. It's just he's the most honest ever. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. The metric that they use there, of course, being, well, if you're counting truthfulness, if you measure truthfulness by the real measure, which is fulfillment of campaign promises, then he's the most honest. Of course, if you used as the metric honesty, well, that's a little bit different. And of course, it's problematic that we find ourselves sitting there. But what I want to try and dig that one up. But one thing I also want to put on the agenda here, if I can insert one, and I know it's probably on yours already. What happened in the Senate, in the Judiciary Committee over the last week? I saw your piece about the deal that was made, and there was lots of discussion about whether or not there and elsewhere, and Twitter and everything, but whether or not the deal was worth making, whether it was a capitulation. Procedurally speaking, it didn't seem to me at first blush to make a great deal of difference, although it's disappointing to people to see deals made when you're talking to liars and thieves.
Right.
But then they just threw a real curveball into it, and I don't think I fully understand the curveball. Can you help us set this up?
The curveball. All right. So before they had started to make this deal, before Schumer was talking with McConnell, making the deal in which 15 of Trump's judges were approved, were confirmed, some on voice vote, so that they could go on recess. Yeah. And the red state senators could go home and campaign.
And everybody kind of hates
the Judiciary Committee had scheduled 2 hearings for a raft of judges.
Okay.
For today and for a week from today, on the 24th. I think it was the 24th, possibly 29th. No, it was the 24th.
Okay.
And so they went ahead and scheduled this deal, made this deal for the 15 judges. We can talk about that separately.
Yeah.
And there was the assumption among Democrats, I believe, that would be it, that then we would actually have recess.
Yeah.
Recess would be recess. Everybody would go away. Grassley says, no, we're going to have these anyway. And we're going to have these on some of the judges that I don't have blue slips for, including some circuit court judges, including the Ninth Circuit, the one that's been most anti-Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Democrats are enraged. They've made arrangements for speaking events and for things that they have to attend back home. They don't want to have to come back to D.C. Sometimes they can't. Grassley saying, too bad. You agreed to this before the other deal was made on the judges, and they went into recess. So recess is not really recess as far as Grassley and McConnell are concerned.
So the benefit of the bargain, if you can call it that, to Democrats was, and I guess to summarize the effect of the deal, allowing the 15 judges to go through. Like a lot of people are initially thinking, well, why would you agree to that? Why not fight it out tooth and nail and make every nomination take as long as possible? And the answer was, as we know, you can't filibuster worth a damn anymore with these things. And, on the whole, that's
well,
still probably okay.
If they forced the 30 hours,
Yeah,
they did
right.
the math, supposedly. And they figured if you do the 30 hours for every vote, do it through the whole month of October, you probably end up with 15 judges approved anyway.
Yeah. If you do nothing but, try and approve judges and allow the filibuster to start, invoke cloture, let the 30 hours post-cloture expire, call the vote, get the job done, start the next one.
Yeah.
And you just continue to do that for the duration of the recess they thought they were buying. Essentially, if you had sat there and wasted your recess doing this, 15 judges would be approved at the end of the month, whether you sat there or not. So they figured, all right, how about we allow through?
Probably.
Yeah,
that was their assumption.
yes, and
So
then,
we
of
don't
course,
do it. We get the 15 judges through, rip the Band-Aid off.
yeah, and then we get a recess out of it. Now, I guess you could always argue you never know.
No, the unknown in this is whether McConnell would have gone ahead and tried to push all 15 judges, whether he would
True.
be good to his word and actually keep them in the entire month going through this.
Right. I mean, that's
circus.
quite a task. And his own conference would be upset about not being able to go also. And of course, say one to 15 of them could be charged with sexual harassment at some point during the next month. You never know what could happen. But okay, that was the idea anyway, was they figured out, all right, if all goes as expected and we did everything we could at the end of this month, if they did nothing but, how many would they get? And the answer was 15. So they agreed to 15. But the idea was you would then get to leave for a recess. And so then they got the deal. And McConnell and Grassley said, okay, 15, the judges are in. And also you're not getting the recess. Is that essentially what happened?
The Judiciary Committee's not getting the recess.
Okay. Right. So they have to stay and work. And others get to go? Is that?
Yeah.
Unless the people change their minds, I guess.
And we process through a whole raft more of bad judges.
Yes, well then there's also that. But that was probably happening anyway. But okay, yeah, well that explains the mechanics of the deal.
Happening now and happening after the election is a different thing.
That is true too. That's not necessarily the same thing, and in this environment, certainly any delay is probably a good thing, even if it means you have to sit there and work hard. Oh no.
Yes.
Okay.
But the votes won't come to the floor on these judges going through judiciary. But it's just, typical of McConnell and Grassley that there's always a catch.
Yeah. Well,
dealing with the devil.
Yeah. So make no more deals, I guess.
The other part of it that's frustrating is that, and I don't know the internal politics at play. I don't know what those discussions were
this is the
internally.
Hard part. Right.
But supposedly only Elizabeth Warren said, no, this is a bad idea. We should stay and fight.
Well, that is weird. And that's something else to keep in mind, too, right? As people, as frequently happens, something bad happens or something that looks bad happens, and it's not, it's not wrong to say, well, now leadership here should have spotted this or should have done things differently. And that's often true, but I don't really care that much for Schumer, period, generally speaking. So I don't carry water for him, but everyone should remember, one, this was a unanimous consent agreement, and all you have to do to stop that is not consent. And two, this is what those internal politics is. Schumer comes to people and says, what do you think about this deal? And if not enough people say, that's bad, and I'm willing to stay and fight, and I'm willing to make all the rest of you angry, if you want to accept the deal and I don't, and I prevent the deal from happening, you're all furious with me, and I'd like to either run for president or have friends in the Senate or whatever. That's kind of what it takes. And and basically the leadership makes the deal that the caucus asks for. And it's not entirely, you can sometimes move people off of those ideas.
The leadership can lean on the caucus.
Certainly can do that. and that probably didn't happen, and he probably thought it would work out, and maybe different leadership would do better. I don't know. But the leadership is usually, the reason they're the leadership is that they don't tend to stray very far from what their caucus wants. That's how you get to be and stay leader. All right. Well, thank you for catching us up on that. We do have to now, of course, take a break, but that was extremely important to me. Now for the rest of you, you get to enjoy the show after the upcoming 2-minute break. I'm sure there's more.
There's always more.
If there wasn't, you could spend more time with us. That's how we know how busy you are. All right. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan Carter is still with us, and thank you for helping clear up what happened inside the Democratic caucus in the Senate and then for the Judiciary Committee, and not surprising.
Well, as much as we know happened inside, there's probably a lot we don't know.
There's always a lot, and it's personality driven. It really is, and like I said, there's always the challenge of, you stand up and be the one who wants to stand and fight, but if most of your colleagues don't want to stand and fight, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that they'll be angry with you if you do, and it's a bad time to have your colleagues angry with you if you're considering running for president, for instance. But a lot of other personalities involved in this too, and it's a mystery, and I don't know, probably not even the subject that'll come up in anybody's tell-all book anywhere either. The hidden history of the Senate will remain that way. It's agreements made over lunch and the personal reflections on it of 45 to 55 very willful and egotistical individuals. That's tough to read.
Yes.
Okay. Man.
Although it does point out once again,
yes.
Vote.
Yeah, you should do that.
And then if you can't vote, help on get out the vote efforts. And we're putting a lot of links for the things that Daily Kos is working on with other groups in most of our posts now. Yeah. So you'll find links there for what you can do to help. And also our activism team is sending out lots of emails about all of the get out the vote opportunities. So
that is good. All right. Well, vote needs
things you
to
can do
get
besides spend your money.
Oh, well, that's helpful, particularly if you've already spent it all.
Yes.
Well, the thing they do with the money usually is pay people to do this work. However, if you show up and do it instead or along with them, that's the same thing, except you get to keep your money. So good.
Right.
Do that. If there's any left.
If there's any left.
Yeah. Well, you can make more that way. And you're not going to make and keep money. You just pretend. As long as the work gets done as though you had more money, you'll feel good about it too.
And of course, there are things you can do outside of your own district. If you're in a deep blue place, then you can call into red places, or you can send postcards or send letters or any number of things. So we have lots of opportunities for everybody to help out.
Excellent. All right. Let's do that. What else? but aside from the things that we can do, what are some of the good and or terrible things that other people that we sometimes vote for or against are doing these days?
Lots of people are lying about their position on pre-existing conditions.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of people, all of them Republicans.
Yeah, that's a weird
thing. In fact,
thing.
Every Democrat that Daily Kos has endorsed, except one, is running against a Republican who is now lying about their position on protecting pre-existing conditions.
That is a strange thing. And I mean,
The one exception, it's an open seat. So the Republican incumbent wasn't in a position to vote on Obamacare.
All right. Yeah. So so you're running against somebody who didn't actually vote against it, but who says that they'll vote to help, but really won't. Mm-hmm. Okay.
My very favorite is Ted Cruz.
That's a sentence.
Yeah, saying favorite is Ted Cruz.
Wow.
In his closing statement last night, in his closing argument last night, in the second debate he had with Beto,
yes,
he said that he wants to save protections for pre-existing conditions. Ted Cruz is the guy that was meeting with the maniacs in Tortilla Flats in, what was it, 2014? 2015?
Yeah.
To shut down the government over repealing Obamacare and those specific protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
Yeah. And I mean, we told them all at the time, listen, even your Republican people like the pre-existing conditions protections. They do. Why are you doing this?
Ted Cruz.
Yeah. And
he's lying about it. Well, of course he's lying, Ted.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. So it stands to reason. But that's an amazing thing to watch them stand in front of their constituency and say, hey, I was always for this. I don't know. I thought you used to rally crowds about how opposed to it you were.
Right. Well, and the latest thing, of course, we're saying is a lot of victimhood. Well, I have people, Scott Walker being one of them. My wife is a type 1 diabetic. Of course I want to keep these protections. No, you don't, Scott Walker.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't. You've been fighting Obamacare in Wisconsin as hard as you possibly could when you were running for president, as briefly as you did so. You were fighting Obamacare. It's Dana Rohrabacher, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Is doing this. A lot of them are, well, I've got somebody sick in my life, so of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it never mattered.
Who knows what they told their sick family members when they were out there stumping to repeal Obamacare.
But now that I have lots of money, don't worry.
To talk about.
I guess so. I mean, it's always true. I mean, that was always part of the astounding thing, is that you knew that every one of them knew someone or had family members or whatever who had pre-existing conditions, because everybody knows somebody.
Everybody does.
That's the whole point of it. But I imagine what they were telling them at the time was, yes, I'm going to repeal this, but remember that doesn't affect us because we have lots of money.
Yeah.
Oh, well, but don't you think that you should have empathy for other people who have pre-existing conditions? No, I told you who I care about, the people in my family who have pre-existing conditions, and I have enough to cover them, so I don't really care. But do I care about people with pre-existing conditions? You bet. I know one. Do I care about other people who have pre-existing conditions being able to pay to receive treatment for it and to afford it? No, I never said that. I just said I know people who have pre-existing conditions, and I want to help them with my money. And that's it. Now, whether or not, I would vote for a provision that would allow you to get help? No, I never said that. You weren't listening to me. But it's actually worse than that.
It really is astounding. Some of these folks have voted as many as 9 times, specifically on this, on total repeal or on undercutting these specific protections.
It used to be the bragging point, how many times they voted against it.
And in one way or another, there have been more than 60 votes against Obamacare.
Right. Can't possibly
From repealing the entire thing to taking out this provision to taking out that provision.
Yes. And you've pointed out a number of times, sometimes it's targeting a different provision, but it undermines either the whole thing, or sometimes it's actually specifically connected to something else that's important, whether it's pre-existing conditions or something else. They found a lot of very devious ways to undermine the most important parts, sometimes directly repealing it and sometimes tinkering with something that takes away the funding that makes it possible. So I don't know. It used to be that's just politics, I guess. Both sides or something like that.
Both sides.
They just, say what you need to say for the day and the crowd that you're facing.
What it does tell us, though, is that healthcare is really pretty much the number one issue as far as voters are concerned this time around. Because they've watched Trump for 2 years do everything in his power to undermine it.
Yeah.
They got what they wanted, and now they don't want it.
Well, that happens too. That's not necessarily politics. That's dogs chasing cars. But
yes.
You know.
Actually, I shouldn't say that because the majority of people in the country did actually vote for Hillary Clinton.
Oh, that's true too. Well, yeah, you can't leave
and
that
for
out.
a Democratic Senate and for a Democratic House.
Yes, I know, and that keeps happening. Actually, I saw a good tweet this morning. I think William Wolfram tweet. I don't know if you follow him, but he was just sort of ironically pointing out the new election tradition. The new election tradition in the U.S. is that everyone watches quietly as the GOP openly cheats. Then afterward, everyone is surprised when the GOP gets more candidates elected despite getting far fewer votes. We all scratch our heads and say, that's just, I guess, what the founders intended, so here we go.
That's pretty much how it works.
Yeah. Well, let's try and not have it happen this time.
Let's try. It's going to be challenging again. Of course, we're seeing the usual from Republicans in Georgia, for example.
Yes.
Not letting black people vote. Did you see the Black Voters Matter bus tour?
Yes.
These are the folks that helped get Jones elected in Alabama. They decided to come out and go all over the South this election season and get people to the polls and get people registered.
Yes, good.
They were taking, in Georgia, a busload of African American seniors to vote. Mm-hmm. When the county clerk called the county-run nursing home or senior center and told them, no, they can't do this. So
why?
The director of the senior center ran out, stopped the bus, made everybody get off the bus.
Oh, the director, they got the director
stopped
of the senior
them
center.
From voting. They got the director of the senior home to intervene. Apparently because it's a county-run senior home.
Okay.
And the county says, nope, illegal because it's partisan.
Voting?
Yeah.
I see. Is that so I don't really get that.
It's enough to make one think that in this county in Georgia, they don't want specifically black people to be voting because black people voting is partisan.
That's what's really happening, of course.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, I'm fairly certain you would be allowed to register voters at the senior center, and that they actually bring people in to do that, typically, at least in normal states. I don't know. Maybe they don't do that in Georgia. Where I live and where I've always lived, senior centers were like major hubs of election activity, though they didn't necessarily host partisan events. They sometimes had candidates nights, but only if they could have both candidates there. But registering people to vote or even placing a polling station inside of a senior center, because
or having people bring in absentee ballots.
Yeah, right.
That happens a lot. Yeah.
The ballots that they have, whether they bring voting machines or bring absentee ballots, typically in most places, those ballots have all the candidates listed on them, no matter what party they're from. And then you choose from between them with no pressure, hopefully, one way or the other. All of a sudden now, though, getting on a bus to go to vote, which, by the way, is probably also a government-run, government-sponsored activity. So you're taking them from a county senior center to a state-run election, or perhaps county-run election for that matter. But that's terrible because bus. No, probably not the bus. Oh, it's the people. Oh, well, that's what the issue is. That's a very weird intervention, I would say. And
it's an infuriating intervention. And Kelly Macias from Daily Kos is following up on that, and we'll be reporting on it later today.
I would like to have some answers on that. And what makes since when is that the clerk's business even. I don't even understand why the clerk would say, I got to call the senior center. Because what? Are the people registered? Yeah. Are the registrations valid? Yeah. So what's the what's the penalty? I don't know. Excessive blocking. I'm going to borrow that one from the movies. What's the issue here? The clerk would have no. I'm not even certain on what basis the clerk would become aware that it was happening. But okay,
I know.
Maybe Kelly can find out.
Probably because some Republican campaign tipped them off.
Right.
But we don't know that for sure.
I'd be interested to find out. I mean, it's not like they were baking a cake for him or anything really troubling. Jeez. What a weird...
Yeah.
Well, okay. Georgia, good luck. You got a lot of obstacles in your way, but the momentum is with you, and I hope it all works out. I more than hope.
Well, I
we
think
should all
what you're
phone
going
call.
to see is that these black seniors, many of whom experienced Jim Crow directly way back when.
Oh, they've been stopped on buses before.
They're going to go out of their way to vote. They are going to do everything in their power to vote.
Yeah, they'll be calling their grandkids, pick me up. This is ridiculous. This is, and they'll tell those stories.
And making their grandkids vote while they're at it.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea too. Might as well get those votes in the bank. Yeah, that was a bus full of people who were like, "Oh, this again? Yeah, I've been stopped on buses down here before. This is not going to faze me this time." Good. All right. Well, I mean, bad story, good reaction, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's see. Casting about for other stories, whatever happens to be on your plate, if you've got another moment.
Well, John Roberts trying to prove that really the Supreme Court is still an okay place. It's still, you can still trust it to make constitutional decisions. He actually had to go out. He was speaking at the University of Minnesota Law School doing a Q&A session and decided that because of the Kavanaugh thing, he didn't say it was because of Kavanaugh, but clearly it was. He was going to have to reassure everyone that, yeah, it's okay. That
we still do this.
We still do this.
Based on the rules or whatever.
The job obviously requires independence from the political branches. The story of the Supreme Court would be very different without that sort of independence. Completely independent. We're serving one nation. We speak for the Constitution. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Citizens United, Shelby County versus Holder, NFIB versus Sebelius. Who are they looking out for? Not the whole nation. The rich people. The rich white people.
Well, maybe that argues
and that was the John Roberts court before Brett Kavanaugh joined. So yeah, this is I'm afraid Adam Serwer is right on this one. I just wrote a piece on it and quoted him that what Roberts is doing here is telling us we're going to see more of what we just saw, and he's preemptively trying to frame those decisions.
I see.
As sticking up for the Constitution, as acts of integrity.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, for instance, he could speak through his actions later and say, see, here are some decisions that, and in ordinary circumstances, a court might, they have historically sometimes bent the other direction occasionally and changed their strike zone, to use his metaphor, just to say, all right, well, we need to calm people down a little bit about their worries about a partisan court. So although we'd love to grab onto this and decide it our way as gimmitarians, if we could see our way clear to letting this one slide, we'll be able to do our own thing with a freer hand later. And instead, he's saying, well, how about if we don't do that, but we say it's still legitimate? If I give a speech, could we still win? Yeah, we could try that. Okay.
It really doesn't help with the two actions that we saw the court take last week with Kavanaugh brand new on the court.
Yeah.
With more voter suppression in North Dakota.
Right.
And what was the other one? It was an oil and gas decision, wasn't it? Upholding Kavanaugh's ruling from the D.C. Circuit.
But I think he actually recused from that one, I believe. But just sort of as a welcome. Hey, how you doing? Well, glad to see you here. We're being asked to rule on your ruling from before. Guess what? We all like it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is not good, and I think you found I think Adam Serwer's analysis A, convincing, and B, just a plain good one. I think that's probably right. They could have actions I understood at one point to speak louder than words, but in this case, I guess we'll always have the words. So there's that.
I think, and I've been one of these people, slightly Pollyanna-ish on John Roberts, largely because of the Sebelius decision, that, he didn't completely act as a partisan and strike down the entirety of the Affordable Care Act. But what he did do was really telling. And that's to say, okay, the Medicaid expansion is optional, meaning millions and millions of poor people around the country were going to be subject to a separate and unequal condition with their health care.
Yeah.
You live in a Democratic state, yeah, you can get on Medicaid. You live in a Republican state, sorry.
Yeah, and it may be that he thought, well, that's a reasonable compromise. I can't go all the way, or maybe he thought, I really am. Maybe he knew somebody with pre-existing
under the
conditions.
bus on this was poor people.
I can do that. So maybe that was supposed to make people feel better about it. You were supposed to overrule the entire thing. Yeah, well, I did hurt poor people. All right, I'll give you another chance.
Yeah.
Maybe he knew somebody with a pre-existing condition.
Maybe.
I wanted to help that person.
Well, he has one. He has epilepsy.
There you are. Okay. Well, that ought to. He's not a wealthy guy, is he? Robert Zeal. How long has he been on the bench in the D.C. circuit? They don't make a tremendous amount of money, not compared to what they could be making in the private sector.
But of course, they also have pretty good health care.
That's true.
Office of Attending Physician.
Oh yeah, do they get to go over there? I mean, it's not far.
Yeah, they get to go over there.
Oh, well, that's okay. That's not fair, but the whole thing.
I know it's
fair.
your favorite.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even. I don't think I ever gave any thought to the fact that the members of the court would probably be able to avail themselves of that too. And I guess that's because technically, well, the whole dodge is, oh no, it's available to members of the public. All you have to do is fall ill inside the Capitol, and then we'll help you. You can't come in for an appointment, but then if Justice so and so calls, and they're not going to say no. If you
maybe
call,
that's what we have to do: create a GoFundMe so we can send all of the desperately sick people to Washington D.C. to hang out in the Capitol.
That's right.
Get health care there.
Yeah. And you could you hang out in the visitor center for a while, and then as soon as a health crisis comes up, they bring you to the office of the attending. Maybe. I mean, they'll probably quickly overwhelm them, but that is one of my favorites because that's the most. That just highlights the hypocrisy more than anything. Is that not only do they have access to this, but I mean it's socialized medicine. It's totally underwritten by the federal government, and they're able to, all you can eat, free, high-end healthcare on the Navy tab if you happen to be a member of Congress or fall ill in the Capitol or have a name that, is recognized on Capitol Hill as somebody that they should allow to have an appointment. That is an amazing thing. And what a bargain, too, about $500 a year.
That's all. Yeah. It's a good deal for them. It's a really good deal.
It is.
Oh, and speaking of socialized medicine,
yes,
Medicare is under assault again, or soon will be.
Right.
We saw from Mitch McConnell yesterday, who's very, very disturbed by the deficit.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yes. And he says we're going to have to do something serious about entitlements.
Yeah.
Both sides.
Oh, and he's almost actually correct about that. Because
almost,
yes. There are always Democrats who are willing to say, I wonder whether the last couple of years would color their willingness to participate in such a thing this time.
I think it has.
I think so too.
After he made this statement yesterday, you saw a concerted push from all of the Democrats to say, yeah, you know what that means? That means your Social Security and your Medicare. I don't think that we're going to see anybody falling for a grand bargain anymore.
Well, I hope not. Although I do anticipate that Republicans will just pull clips and whatever else from the days when Democrats did flirt with such things and say, ha, you're a hypocrite. You used to say when the deficit was high that we needed to look at entitlements. Now the deficit's high again and you won't look at entitlements. And, we'll see whether that works. Of course, part of the answer is, well, we got the deficit low again. And we didn't need to do that. And then you ruined it. And now it's your problem. And now you're like, oh, I need your bipartisan cooperation to fix my mess. No, you don't. And you're not going to get it. You find a way to fix it. It won't come from me. We'll see.
I think we may have finally, though, got our elected Democrats to tune into what's really going on here, that they get it.
Yeah, I hope
when they
so.
say deficit, what they mean is they want to cut Social Security and Medicare.
Right. Well,
and
I hope they've learned
that the majority of us really are not happy with that idea. So I think we've made it that far. In fact, I'm just seeing a tweet from Chuck Schumer.
Oh.
The Republican two-part approach to cuts. Cut taxes for corporations, cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid for everyone else.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that they do get that, and I hope that there will be no financial sector wooing of moderate Democrats please recognize that this makes sense, and we want you involved in this. And there probably will be one or two, but I guess now's the time to whip them into shape and see whether we can change that in, Delaware, let's say. And,
what I am still a little worried about and what we have to watch for is what happens in the lame duck. Whether the House budget that was approved by the Budget Committee ends up getting a vote, because it has the reconciliation instructions to cut $302 billion from entitlement programs this year. And of course, because it is a because it is a budget resolution, it doesn't require the 2/3 vote in the Senate. So, or the 60 votes, rather.
Right, yeah. So, no
Democrats
filibuster
can't
the
filibuster
budget.
it.
Yeah. And then that would set up a reconciliation bill, same way.
Do we see this be Paul Ryan's swan song?
Wow.
In the lame duck session? We know that he's always wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess then they'll feel like they need to do something to send him off because he's gone after this. But, well, that's extraordinarily dangerous and not usually the season in which we're thinking of such things. This catches us, it's a reconciliation instruction out of season.
Right. The only thing that we have to keep in mind with this is vote for as many Democrats as you possibly can.
Yes.
If we overwhelm the House with Democrats, I think it will make a lot of Republicans who squeaked through very, very careful in how they choose to vote.
Well, you certainly would hope so. And then, of course, the lame duck has a definite ending point to it, and delaying tactics at that point will be perhaps more effective. And if we can just push things to the point where they've literally run out of time, we can block these reconciliation instructions from going through.
Yes. And hopefully also they'll be fighting with Trump over whether or not they're shutting down government over the border wall. So that might just distract everybody enough that they don't try to make these huge cuts.
Yeah. Well, that would be helpful. And of course, if it's a Democratic House executing reconciliation instructions from a previous Republican House next time around, I don't even know. Well, would that even work? I don't know whether they expire. Those reconciliation instructions survive during budget years across Congresses. That's something I have to sit down and think about rather than figuring it out on the fly. But at any rate, the best pressure you can put on them to keep them from going crazy during the lame duck is coming up. Do it at the voting booth. That's the best threat you can leverage against them and not get arrested.
Absolutely, it's your vote.
Yes, even though they might arrest you after your vote too. But don't worry about that. We'll get you out.
Right.
I think. All right. Well, anyway, I don't want to make too dark of an ending.
Tweet at us, we'll get you out. We'll raise the money for bail.
Yeah, we can do
Kagro
that.
and I personally, if you tweet at us when you're in jail.
What?
For voting.
All right. Well, we can make that promise and then not deliver on it. That's okay. I will do my best. I'll find people who can help out who have more money than we do.
We can raise the money for bail.
That's
we
the
can
thing.
definitely do that.
Okay. Generally speaking, that's doable, and our community will come to your aid. It'll be the right thing to do. Thanks, Joan, for coming in and visiting us with. Also, the right thing to do. We appreciate it. And,
Well, most welcome. Talk to
yes.
you next week.
Very good. All right. Thanks again. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, back to the salt mines with you, Joan, for one more week. Thanks for listening today. We'll be back tomorrow with more with Greg Dworkin one more time this week.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
More to come still, of course, on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. Look at this. The Interior Department selected a Bundy supporter who favors war against the Bureau of Land Management to serve as its senior legal advisor. How do you think that's going to go? And the same thing basically going on at the EPA Children's Health Office, too. Stay tuned.